We appear to be live.
All right. Welcome to Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. This is October 26th, and I'm here with me in the room are Zach and John and Max. And I will let them introduce themselves. I'm the co-host to the other co-host is wandering around the world, or at least in California last time I'm aware. Um, uh, Kevin Bell, and he will join us at some point in the future and when he can. So today is a roundtable or just kind of talking about, we don't have a special guest to provide information to us, but we're going to just talk about some issues that we want to talk about that are about politics in Southern Oregon. So folks want to introduce themselves. Zach.
Sure. I'm Zach Whitworth, uh, born and raised in Roseburg, in the history department at the University of Oregon right now. Um, Affiliated with the Institute for Social Ecology, friend of community rights Douglas County, and always happy to be here.
John.
Yeah, I'm John Hunter. I'm president of Community Rights Douglas County, and I'm on the board of the Oregon Community Rights Network. And it's good to be here.
Max.
Hi, my name's Max Smoot. I'm with Frog Leg Studio. It's my art studio downtown on Southeast Stevenson Lane. We do food not bombs every Saturday out in front where we make some food and we have it like a potluck kind of thing. Anyway, running for mayor, just so you know. And I'm happy to be here, part of the discussion.
So, well, one of the things that caught my attention this week was I went and watched the city council meeting that was held the last city council meeting. Because there were two things that had been on the agenda. One was just kind of an update of what they were going to do going forward about a urban campground, and which is why I really initially wanted to watch it, which really came to that they are going to do another work study about a work session to study what to do about it. And I laughed because, oh my God, this is, like the common tactic of bureaucrats and elected officials when they don't really want to do anything. Let's study it again. Sort of like the parking meter stuff in the downtown area. But were what I also was aware that there was some discussion that was held regarding the investigation report regarding the city council person who resigned at the beginning of the year over allegations that she was being bullied and potential threats to her job. She works for UCAN, and so the city council had decided to hire somebody. It cost 60 plus $1,000 apparently for the report, is what was revealed at the meeting. And it basically came out that there may have been some bullying, but there was no potential, that didn't seem to say any wrongdoing. I have not read the report. I do intend to do that. The city council, they did vote to release the document. They could have held it, and they really didn't release much information about the content of it while the whole matter was pending, but they did decide to release it. And I'm assuming they might redact some things, but it sounded like the full report would be reduced. I thought I would see it on the website. I couldn't find it on the website, but there may have been some mention that you have to ask for it. So I am going to ask for the report and reading it sometime in the future. We'll take a look at it. Because some of the things that the Mayor Larry Rich in Roseburg mentioned were a little bit disturbing, particularly in regard to an assertion that Councilwoman Ellen Porter had been a bully. And, she had made some reference at the city council that she had asked the mayor to intervene in because she had received inappropriate communication from a fellow city council person outside, up to and including calling her a liar regarding an issue, whether about maybe some misstatement that was made regarding how many grants past urban campgrounds are going to happen. And I don't want to go into details with that because that's not really the relevant point. And the relevant point is that Mayor Rich, instead of actually intervening or trying to deal with the issue, went to call out Ellen Porter from the city council in response to her comments, blaming her for the situation that arose. And she stated that she did provide misinformation, but she got it from OPB, and she thought the information was accurate. And I personally think that that's kind of information, honestly, I'd rely upon. Yeah, I would assume that they got their facts straight. But a fellow city council person called her or texted her, I'm not sure, and called her a liar, and then they went into this whole issue of whether the city council should create some kind of guidelines or punishment, I don't know, some kind of process to, do something about this. I got to say that Ellen's, and I encourage people to go listen to it because I think it's very important and to listen to it because I'm not going to, verbatim translate it. I wouldn't even remember everything that was said. But I gotta say, from my own perspective, I guess I have a personality more like Ellen than Andrea Zielinski, who is the city councilor who um, called her. Okay. And Andrea is a very timid person from my experience. Okay. But having the person that, I have, people have referenced me as being a bully, probably even people in City Hall. But the reality is, it's a structure thing, it's a power structure thing. And I think it's a personality thing. I think Ellen's right that some of us, and maybe even, a little bit of that sexism involved is because we're women who will be assertive and they take that for inappropriate aggression and bullying from women. So I'm just saying that from my perspective. I've heard this before from people. Often it is people that I tell you would have never heard me or seen me or known my name had you not done something wrong. And so, and it's in an instance usually within a power structure, such as calling somebody out who, I think we have a right to do. I think a city councilor, has a right to try to address issues with other city councilors. And I was really concerned that there was even any real consideration of studying what they could do about this, because then who's going to decide whether something's bullying or really just the right that we have. And as elected officials, I don't want my two ward representatives or the mayor be hampered by asserting things we want to, because they're afraid they're going to be called out. And frankly, we've had a history where people have had duels, okay? I mean, come on. It is not always comfortable, and really, if you can't deal with a problem, if you can't deal with assertive behavior or even disagreements in a mature manner, you should not be an elected official from my perspective. I got to say that that's really how I look at it. Now, there can be people who go off the top, they go behind people's backs, they misuse their power. That's a different discussion. I didn't hear anything about that alleged towards Ellen Porter. And I say kudos to Ellen for, being willing to do the stuff. And I know at least on the homeless issue, I can see her frustration. Hell, I've been doing this a lot longer and I'm frustrated as hell. But, she is trying to do something that most of her fellow city councilors aren't and are actually making worse when it comes to many issues and include, in particularly around homelessness. So that's kind of my real pet peeve is I think that we have to discuss the real serious problem of trying to hamper, which is, this backdoor dealing or the behind the scenes dealing, I think, like with the park system, right? People that's the other thing, is how many of these conversations are happening behind closed doors that might be violating the public meetings law. That serial communication, one after the number, you get to five, right? So I am gonna, I am requesting the actual text or communication, if it was text from the city, but that's Andrea sent Ellen, because it's actually a matter of public record, even if it's in their private emails. They may think it's not, some people have the delusion, but anything they're talking about city business and they're in that position, that's potentially subject to the public records request. I had also heard that there had been another city council person doing the same type of thing a while ago. And so I'm also going to ask for those communications too, because I think there is this real threat to democracy. And I see the bullies as what was described about Andrea's behavior. That's who I see the bully being, right? Is to go, I don't call people up. If I'm going to call you out, I'm not going to call you up and call you a name, or I'm not going to text you a name and call you a liar and have that conversation in that manner. So that's out of my comfort level. So anybody else see it, read it, look at the thing? Were you there, Max, when this all happened? You've been going to city council meetings?
You muted, Max.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I watched that one live when it was happening. I missed the last couple of them, and I, yeah, I might have watched it later, but yeah, I was pretty surprised when I heard that conversation between Mayor Larry Rich and Ellen Porter, and but especially when she was talking about the homelessness, she was saying essentially she kind of was resigned from trying to even get that council to even do anything because she had just seen it so many times, and it's not, I forgot what her words were, but it was essentially, from what I remember, it was like, this is like ridiculous. It's not. So, and I don't remember what even happened on that conversation as far as the homeless issue thing went, or the urban campground or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I can see it clearly. Yeah, they're having a work study session, right? They're gonna do another. So yeah, I don't see that going anywhere. It's just another thing. And so yeah, the pressure is going to continue to mount, and like the bubble is going to continue to, and people will continue to trivialize it, this kind of ongoing daily crisis by saying, it's these irresponsible or, you know, messed up people or whatever. It's just all these criminals and fear mongering about how it's criminals, and if we have a camp, it's going to be a cesspool of crime and insanity or whatever. So yeah, I saw one of the ways another person on Facebook I saw kind of characterize it was that there is not the political will to solve the problem. So that's why you won't see it happening in an official way. There's the political will is against, doing anything like providing free services for the general public. So from what I can tell, not much can change that. So that was what we were talking about earlier, was me running for mayor just is kind of like my way to challenge the public dialogue here and try to instigate some kind of real I don't know, kind of accountability, I guess, in our communications publicly about these things. Because yeah, that one time when they came out saying they were going to buy that old trucking station or whatever, and everybody came in with all their stories about how bad the homeless people are or whatever, and how it's going to damage, like it's going to put their kids at risk and all this stuff, and is largely just a bunch of kind of fear mongering, saying that this is going to attract more homeless people and more. What I want to do is find out what the deal is like, because I think most of the people that are at the point are not like new to the area. but I don't really know that. I kind of want to go check it out more because I think largely people they're going with the same kind of argument as the protests, like, oh, they're shipping them in, they're paid protesters, and like these are paid homeless people getting government assistance and all this stuff. It's like, no, actually, we need a porta potty down there pretty quick. So I don't know what the fuck anybody's talking about as far as anything else, but like, there's just a lot
Well,
of, you know,
well,
services.
they'll study it. They'll study it in their work session. So you should rest assured that, that they'll contemplate that with their navel. Zach, did you happen to catch any of the city council meeting?
I did, and I replayed a certain couple minute segment a few times. Um, I think what I would like to highlight is that the meeting at one point devolved into a discussion about bullying. And I've I've known Mayor Larry Rich since I was in high school. In that he worked at the high school. I've known other members of the city council for a very long time. Jason Tate was my former soccer coach when I was in high school. Shelley Briggs Loosely, my family has known since I was a little kid. Um, it's firstly, I think it should be made very clear that when Kylie Rummel, former city councilor, resigned earlier this year, it was not simply about being bullied. The word that she used was intimidation. That she had been intimidated, that her job had been threatened. Bullying and intimidation are not quite the same. There is a certain intention in intimidation that's not just mere bullying. Intimidation is, yes, threatening, but threatening to achieve certain ends. And most importantly, as opposed to bullying, intimidation has a very clear hierarchy to it. And two kids are like the same age, same height, same stature, same role in a classroom or on the playground at a school, uh, still has a degree of equality about it. Like a small kid can bully a larger kid. Uh, it can be threatening. It can be threatening behavior. It can be antagonizing. It could be harassment. But it's not necessarily to a certain end. Intimidation, threatening, is to get somebody to do something and to use one's position of power and authority that another does not have as leverage to get them to do what you want them to do. Um, and what happened in that meeting, this last meeting, was Ellen was intimidated. This conversation about bullying devolved into Mayor Larry Rich intimidating Ellen Porter, using his position as mayor to publicly shame her with or without grounds, but to basically put a target on her back in front of the eyes of city administrators, other city councilors, the whole community. Um, that is a form of threat.
Mhm.
Um, and I find it horrible and somewhat amusing in a twisted way that Mayor Larry Rich, of all people, the king of the bullies in Roseburg, Oregon, is is decrying bullying. A man who's enabled systemic intimidation and the perpetuation of oligarchy the the conquest of our own community for years. For someone like that to be talking about bullying, it's not just hypocritical, it's embarrassing, it's shameful, and uh, all the more reason to vote for Max Smoot.
That's a great segue. Um, so, what are we going to do about it? I was just thinking as you were talking, man, Zach, that would be a good letter to the editor,
I
to
have a
the news
question.
review. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I mean, they've always said at the commissioners' meetings that they can only discuss business at county meetings and that. So, and I assume that's supposed to be the case for city council. So if
Well,
somebody sent, if one counselor sent another counselor a text, basically referring to city business, calling them a liar, isn't that in violation of what?
no, because
No?
no, because the conundrum the county commissioners has is there's only three. It violates the public meetings law when there's communication that creates a quorum. Okay, so even if it's in serial communication. So for Groesberg, it would have to be five. If five of them met in a room, and discussed things or even talked over the phone in one communication or one after the other, that violates Oregon's public meeting law. So the problem is that with the county commissioners, it only takes two,
Okay.
right? Because there's only three of them. So two's a
Okay.
quorum. So no, it's actually not. I said, yeah, it is. In theory, it all applies, but there's that nuance of the number that creates the quorum.
Okay.
So,
I want to also
so go ahead, Zach.
stress that while I could go on about Mayor Larry Rich, or I could talk at great length about the cruelty of of those who I've known for a long time, the cruelty of counselors like Jason Tate and Shelley Briggs Loosely. But uh, these kinds of characters sitting on a city council and through their broader um, influence in the community with people like Shelley Loosely tied directly to their wealth and status. Uh, they're on the council because this is the nature of city councils as we know them, which are not organically grown from the people democratically, but are
Right.
a form historically imposed upon every community. And that really is a product of, in Oregon especially, it's a product of imperial expansion into the interior and west coast of of North America, now the United States. Uh, we are in a very different um, municipal situation than, say, the old town meeting systems in New England that still kind of exist in vestigial form. We've never had forms like that. The
Yes, true. That's true.
most so-called directly democratic um, meeting forms that appear on the record in the early days of the state of Oregon having been established, and just prior to that, were mobs. Like in Southern Oregon, groups that were known on record as exterminators who organized meetings to discuss how they were going to kill people like the Takelmas. That's that's the kind of democracy that's foundational to the towns and counties of Southern Oregon. So when we're thinking about a city
Maybe you're
council,
making an argument to support the representative form of government.
No, no, no. That's not my suggestion. Like those kinds of forms are where our city councils, our representative forms here in places like Oregon are really emerging from.
Yeah,
It's to say that I would not be calling our city council system in towns like Roseburg democratic in any serious sense. These are oligarchies. These
yeah,
are these are these are tyrannical forms of government that are dominated by local notables. And a city council is going to, in its form, giving great autonomy, great power that a handful of people can exercise over the entire community based on their own interests, not necessarily the interests of the people. Uh,
yes, yeah, very true. And I think that we could devote and should a whole show about this because I think you raised really excellent point that we don't understand the problem of why we are where we are. And I would say that, and I don't know every city council person. I mean, I do know and am friends with Ruth Smith. And she does not come from that power structure. She is an exception, but then that's what we need to be able to make is exceptions and actually remove that power structure because it's not just you don't have to be the Shelley Briggs loosely, you also can be an anointed person by the Shelley Briggs looseleys of the city.
yeah.
And that's the problem. I mean, that hand controls a whole lot, which may even been why the counselor who resigned did, right?
Mhm.
Right. I mean, she may have been there because she was seen as no threat or someone willing to work as the power with the power structure. I
Hmm.
don't know.
Larry's asked
And
in the chat, I'll read this out loud to the speaker, which was me. What alternative city government structure would you suggest? Well, something that we've talked about on previous programs of SOPP, and something we've talked about in Community Rights Douglas County, uh, is a kind of assembly system, one that is rooted in neighborhoods. That could take the form of neighborhood councils or neighborhood assemblies in which people come together and don't just elect officials who govern over them and make real decisions rather than the people themselves. I think what we need is actual democracy in towns like Roseburg, counties like Douglas, and beyond, uh, that that actually grant each and every person a vote in real decisions that affect their community, not just giving their power away to a handful of individuals who then are not really accountable most of the time to the public.
Yeah,
And that has existed historically in many, many cases.
totally.
That's even
Yeah,
existed
very
here
possible.
in North America. As I mentioned, that existed in New England during the colonial period. Uh, the town meeting system, the provincial assembly system, that existed all the way up into the 1780s and was the backbone of the American Revolution. That's a form that we have in the American tradition, maybe not necessarily the Oregonian tradition, but we do have that in our long-term lineage as a polity called the United States. And it does exist still in vestigial form, like in parts of like Vermont, for example. You could still find the old town meeting system, although it's limited to fairly minimal decision making, and a lot of them only meet like once a year, which is not the result of them dying out. It's a result of them being crushed. First in like Massachusetts after the Boston Tea Party, when the British Empire occupied militarily Boston Harbor and destroyed the town meeting system. And subsequently in the 1780s, when those systems were replaced by force with the state constitution system, state legislatures, and even overriding more radical state legislatures like in Pennsylvania, unicameral legislature overridden by bicameral legislatures dominated by the rich. That's what we're now coming from. Uh, Direct democratic forms that have been crushed. I think it's worth looking back at what we actually have in American history, real democratic forms, and building them, sometimes from scratch. Are we not a
So,
representative republic for practicality reasons, is the question. Uh, I would argue
easier to
no.
manage, right? It's easier to manage, right? And,
Well, for
you
who
know,
to
the
manage?
Right.
well, let's say some of the business. I mean, some of the business that people aren't going to, sit in meetings and have discussions about the water system, right? The intricacies of paying for the water system. So there's always this argument against direct democracy, right? Is this problem of as we become more complicated, doesn't it make it harder for business to be accomplished? What we think about all the things the city does, just the city of Roseburg does, not even a real big city. It has
Well, I think that's
responsibility
more,
for it.
that would be more in favor of an argument for developing specialists. But having
Mhm.
specialists in a community who can be part of conversations and be advisors and guides does not mean we should have a technocracy, a rule by
It's good.
techno,
Yeah, yeah, you're
rule
right.
by
Yeah,
specialists.
that's a good point. Yes. And people can learn all this stuff. A lot of the stuff that people don't know about government isn't all that mysterious as a general rule,
Right.
right? I mean, they can learn it. It's how they get whether they ever get the information. But a town hall would be much better, even an electoral process, to decide even representative government is what I was thinking of. That if you wanted a representative body, it would still be better to have that done in that more town hall kind of arena, and that they use the caucuses, right, in presidential elections in some states, right, to come together and decide who you know people are voting for. That may be a better system locally. And I
That's,
don't know, but go
I
ahead.
mean, that's not the same though. I mean, I like what you were saying, Zach, earlier about directly voting as a populace rather than allowing these handful of people to vote for you. Essentially, it's an electoral thing too, the electoral college, right? It doesn't really represent people, it represents these special people that now, kind of co-opted the people's voice and the people's vote and stuff. Um, but yeah, so people will say, "Oh, that's too complicated. You can't count everybody's votes and take everybody's comments because there's so many comments." And you look at Facebook and it's like, "Oh my God, look, democracy failed. Look at all these comments. You can't even read them all. They don't make sense." But yeah, like you're saying, there's consultants and there's people that are elected or just understood as the experts and the people who and like you said, they shouldn't be the ones making the final call, really. They should just be advising and supporting the people to make the but so the other thing I was thinking was I don't know, I'm trying to make sense of this, but yeah, like those people, they don't represent the people's voice because the people would be going with a lot of what the experts and stuff have figured out and the scientists and all that. But yeah, no, our city government as a tyrannical system has rejected most and all of, I mean, that's kind of what it does is it rejects the best practices or any kind of human, progress that's been made. They kind of reject it and go with whatever the mob of people says that's telling them that, oh, you know either we got to have our fireworks or we can't have a homeless camp or whatever. And that happened with the fireworks too. I mean, the fire chief was saying, nah, we should ban fireworks this time or whatever, and they still went against it. So like, having a representative or whatever, that hasn't really worked either. But we're missing
Well,
like what you're saying about having the experts that inform the whole public dialogue. So
now, and I'm going to throw this whole a monkey wrench right into this whole thing. We're in the world of Trump, and there are people who vote, who have the right to vote, who don't give a shit about facts. Okay, so even the expert would not persuade them necessarily. And I'm not against what you say that I think we do need that. But I don't think that because there are obstacles that it should be rejected, right? That it would be better because we'd have more buy-in. I mean, we know this about even just small groups, right? That the more that people are involved in making the decision, the more likely they'll actually do the work you want them to do, right? So even in developing, organizations we belong to, if we really want them to grow, our effort has to be really to involve more people, or
Yeah.
we become, the default, dictator of whatever the cause is, myself being guilty of that happening. But
Yeah.
really it is. I think you're fundamentally, that's absolutely right. And I think there's a good segue into the one thing I want to talk to, because I do want you to talk about the fascism, the article. And it's really about just following up on the No Kings rally. And that we had talked last week about planning for more, that there's this sentiment that we really have to do more. And I was listening to the radio this morning, and they were talking about Jesse Jackson and Jesse Jackson's activism, and made a very excellent point. He was part of the civil rights movement under Martin Luther King Jr. And that and they were comparing it to those kinds of efforts with efforts like the Black Lives Matter and various other movements that have happened more recently, and observing that people have gotten have learned how to protest. What they haven't really learned to do is uh, translate that into how to work for power within the system that we have, right? And even, and that includes like Max running for office, or people running for office can even help push this dialogue about what we're talking about, even the structure of government. So and I think that that's where we really miss it, within the movement, the resistance movement against what's happening now is doesn't seem to be focused enough on developing that power, right? And a lot of us don't even want anything to do with it, right? If we're kind of like, I don't want this government system. But the reality is, if we're not in there, and if we're not at the table, as they say, we're going to be lunch. We already are lunch. And so the more that we resist doing that, and I don't even think you have to overtly be engaged in being on a council or board in government. I think you just have to be present in the arena, and you have to do what we have done, all of us here have done, is gone there and talked about issues and to keep them accountable, and help people um, do something. But I think that one of my urgency about the whole, resistance movement is I do see this, that we are in fascism now. People want to say we're marching towards fascism. And I think that that's just trying to either ignore it, right? Or you don't want to admit, and try to, but then I don't see what are we going to do about it. So, Zach, you want to talk about the state of fascism in America?
Well, I mentioned before we started the stream, actually earlier today, I was in a call with Professor Piers Staudenmeier, who teaches out at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Uh, he's best known as a scholar of fascism. He knows uh, modern Europe like the back of his hand. His major focuses are on the development of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy during the interwar period. And and I took some notes from our discussion today. Mostly we're talking about, yeah, the in his opinion, we're we're in basically fascistic conditions. Um, in many regards quite different than what one finds in the historical record looking at the Nazis or the Italian fascists under Mussolini. But there are certain comparisons that could be made. Um, suggestions that he offered to me was, well, firstly, as he sees it, the No Kings demonstrations, not really protests because they didn't have clear um, demands. Um, he told me that he thought they were pretty directionless. And what we really need right now, above all else, are solid, grounded principles that are um, not subject to it's not alteration change, that we're not subjecting to a kind of opportunism. So if conditions are changing, we don't change our fundamental principles, is the suggestion. That we hold fast and we don't compromise on the things that we believe in, the things that we understand make a decent society, and the goals that we strive for in our organizations, in our education. So, but the most important thing is we can't just be opportunists. Um, and we need clear principles. We need coherence. And that applies not just to the No Kings events, but it applies to even small groups like those of our own, who are discussing these problems and who are organizing on the grassroots level, who are educating each other, educating our neighbors. If we don't have a clear vision, we have no answer for fascism.
Um, I think I agree with that take on it. I mean, when I call them protests, I guess you're right, they are just demonstration because, 1.5 hours every so often is just not really, mass protest or mass mobilization, for an hour and a half
The, the,
isn't.
the better word, I think, would be rally, even.
Yeah, yeah.
Because much of what the No Kings events, rallies are to encourage people to vote for the Democratic Party come next election.
Hmm.
Right. And there's this
Yep.
concept, I think, with the delaying of the admitting that we're dealing with fascism. We call the Democrats often want to say, okay, if we just keep voting Democrat, but that's not the case. It kind of switches back and forth all the time. And then same with the Democrats, they actually are instituting fascist, elements too. So it's not like they are working together in a lot of ways, but they do have their little like infighting. It seems like um, between the Democrats and Republicans, even though they're basically the same. I've seen them as pretty much a part of the same kind of movement for a long time. But yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, now we're dealing with even more like uh, restriction of food being, distributed and stuff. That's a big red flag. Um,
Well, that's kind of an example of what an authoritarian fascist government would do, right?
yeah,
In manipulating like this opportunity to, remove food. There's 27,000 based on data that was in the news review and they sourced it from some state organization of 27,000, recipients of SNAP benefits in Douglas County, right? And so they're willing they're willing to sacrifice, that number of people. But you could also say that in some sense, for the Democrats and, regarding, oh, so they should give up on their demands. But then the demand they would be giving up is also then to cut people's Medicaid, right? I mean, so, and it's so easy to be manipulated and having to make the choice. I mean, I've said I am an active person in the Democratic Party locally, and I still am. I have become more pragmatic, in my opinion, in my older age. I wouldn't have said this if I were, 40 years younger. Um, but the reality is and we were talking earlier, there's going to be a ballot initiative to get nonpartisan elections in Oregon, and to have and the other one is to do the two top votes go, in a primary go to the general election, so nonpartisan primaries. And that's just reformist politics, but I think it is something we should support, because one of the reasons the stranglehold of both of the parties in the electoral process in Oregon has to do with that partisan election system, that decides who our state representatives are, who decides who our Congress, right, people are. Because they're partisan elections, that it's hard to break. I mean, I've been a non-affiliated voter, and I've also been a member of the Pacific Green Party. And it's really very difficult for a third party in Oregon or even in California, who did change their system to the nonpartisan primary in certain elections in California after I left. But that may be something that'll help shake that, and it certainly would get a way to get more people involved in a primary election. But it certainly is not an end all to it. But besides, one of the things that I think that you had mentioned, Zach, is about the article in the News Review, that was about the impact. And we are one of the states that have one of the counties in Oregon that has the highest impact of the federal tax cuts, because of and including our workforce, because what it was more equal to or more than 4.8% of our workforce is in the federal government in Douglas County. And so that article was actually taken by the News Review from the Oregon Journalism Project. And there's more data, there's more information at the website of the Oregon Journalism on the article than what the News Review covered. But I think it would be interesting to know exactly what those numbers are for Douglas County. And I'm gonna, take a look at it, because the article I looked at from the Oregon, I think, just came out today. It just didn't the article, I think, came out from the Oregon Journalism Project today, the release to that data. Um, so the economic impact. So Zach, based upon the discussion, is the opportunism of pointing these kinds of things out regarding the authoritarian fascism, you know, how do you how would the professor translate that and as something that's worth pursuing, or one of those hardcore things you're not going to back up from? How would you use this opportunity? Because I see it as an organizer, as an opportunity.
Well, opportunism, by opportunism, we mean that we don't change our fundamental principles to suit, uh, say, an election, to change what we profess to hold dearly, merely to get people to vote for a certain politician or party. Um,
AKA
that
compromise.
compromise, well, no, compromising, not through like discursive reconciliation, and doing so while maintaining that it is a reconciliation, but compromising um as in eroding one's principles, to jeopardize one's own principles, to relinquish them, rather than to assert them, um, and assert them discursively. Uh, uh, So one thing actually from the article that I only have a few minutes before I have to go. One thing from the article that was republished in the News Review uh, discussed federal employees making up a lot of the workforce in rural counties in Oregon, particularly Sherman County. Um,
Mhm.
but here in Douglas County, we've got a pretty high rate as well. But one thing really stood out to me. So not just the U.S. Postal Service, which basically funds itself. Um, the article reads, quote, President Trump also signed an order that ensured paychecks for active duty military personnel, which were issued on October 15th, which is a funny exception. You could do the same for virtually any federal employees. Why active duty military personnel? Something that Professor Staudenmeier talked about earlier today when I was in conversation with him was that he has out in Milwaukee actually a fair amount of service members who take classes with him and talk with him in his office hours. And in from what he's seen, there are quite a few service members who are questioning their recent orders and the inclinations of the White House to deploy them to American cities. I mean, the understanding that one might have is I signed up for the armed services to defend my country. I didn't sign up for the armed services to occupy a city within my own country. And that uncertainty and questioning was of interest to Professor Staudenmeier. He suggested that organizations, progressive organizations, radical organizations, need to actually speak to service members
Yeah,
uh,
so I was
to
just thinking.
to press them to really consider what it is they're doing and if they're if they are in the service to serve the whims of a particular official, or if their duty is to not just the Constitution, but to the American people. Um, ultimately,
Right. Yeah.
the military being on the side of the people is very important. And there are a lot of people in the armed services who come from, working class families or ethnic minorities and are actually concerned. Um, so what we can do to push the conversation and address service members currently is well worth doing. That was the recommendation that I got. And that's also notable in that can be im seen implied in the statement in this article is that when Donald Trump is um, trying to secure pay specifically for military personnel, it's something of a sign that he doesn't even know how loyal the military will be to him. That's, I think, a valuable piece of information to keep in mind and to press on. Like a few weeks ago, um, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, arranged this big meeting with a bunch of military officials,
Yes.
generals and admirals, and not everybody was on board with this program pretty clearly. And that kind of questioning from the military um, is a sign that the Trump administration, the Trump regime, may not have the kind of assured force behind it in the military that they would hope to have. And it should be clarified that DHS, ICE, federal agents that have been sent into various cities, including Portland and Eugene here, somewhat, especially cities like Chicago and LA right now. Uh, they're not the same as the military.
Right. So I just know where you are coming from. Have you ever served an elected, appointed, or volunteer? Is that
Where
a
am I
general
coming from?
question? Yeah, it's in the chat. Um,
No, I haven't. I have not done active military service myself. I'm mostly relaying a conversation that I had with a scholar of fascism earlier today, who's
um,
versed in the Italian experience and the German experience, especially, and what roles of militaries have played in furthering fascism or preventing it.
One of the things I think it's very important to point about my parents were very active anti-Vietnam War folks when I was young. And, and one of the things that in watching them, and there was this vitriol towards the servicemen themselves, right? That happened during Vietnam, is blaming the soldiers without recognizing that many soldiers, well, almost all of them were drafted against their will. and over only a privileged few could get exempt from that draft. But many times, even if you don't have a draft situation, we have people that have very limited economic alternatives that actually end up in the military to begin with, particularly the service people that are, doing all the fighting on our behalf. Um, and there was a different scenario under a draft. But the one thing, in just, watching the aftermath and discussion, I think it was a mistake by the anti-war movement to pick on the soldiers because they are victims. They are victims like the rest of us. I feel that way about the police, and I know that that might be counterintuitive to a lot of left-wing people, fighting fascism. But again, and in line with that, housing for some goal, we do a sign that I created. It was about your possessions when you're homeless and your right to be. But and there's a notice on it. It's a 8.5 by 11 saying that these are protected by state law and a case law, federal case law about possessions. You have to store them and keep them given back to me, no, no, no. But it goes into saying, and you could be held personally liable under a particular statute under federal law for taking my stuff by doing harm to me without under the color of law that you don't really have the authority to do. And basically, is this really what you so we put at the bottom, is this really what you signed up for when you wanted to be a police officer? So it's like, do you really want to be doing this kind of thing? And it's kind of that carrot and stick, but it's also saying, is this really what's happening? Because I do believe that and when I haven't gone recently to watch sweeps, so there was one, but I don't go up and challenge the officers. I'm there as a watcher, right? Because challenging the officers, there's nothing to be gained by that, actually. At least, challenging them adversarially, but informing them. But I think that, now that in this discussion, having probably some of those conversations with the police who are, moving people around and really, I think, terrorizing homeless people. And they may not view it that way, but that really is what I see. That's what I hear. The things I hear, really, but I think it's a really good point. Um, so, anything else before you go, Zach?
Uh, Anything else really quickly? Oh, another thing from my earlier conversation today is reminder that Trump has no vision. He has no political program.
That's
He is
right.
only reactive, volatile, and even those in his cabinet can't keep up with him. And that is frightening, certainly, but it is also to our advantage. That means there are clear holes that we can poke in regimes like this. And that's through, firstly,
Hey, he has a
clarifying our
vision.
principles.
He has a vision of a ballroom, the biggest ballroom since Versailles. He
Yeah,
didn't
for
say
now,
that,
and
but
then it's
that's
not
what
going
it
to be important.
reminded me of it. You know, it's like, oh my God, I studied French history too much because, you know what happened to those guys, right? But yeah, the
Well,
bit
there
and
are
it's
certain parallels between the Trump and probably Napoleon III, Louis Napoleon, in 1848, uh, is elected the president of the new French Republic after the 1848 revolution. 1851 too, he stages a self-coup and establishes himself as emperor of the Second French Empire and
yeah.
razes a lot of the city of Paris, among other cities.
Uh, but Versailles still exists.
Yeah, but a lot of the working class neighborhoods of Paris do not. In their
Yeah.
place, they have big boulevards and monuments, which are great for
Um,
military control.
and speaking of the ballroom, I would say that these are kind of these, wag the dog kind of distractions, right? That to focus too much energy about worrying about the damn ball because is that really what is the big issue here is the ballroom and so it's kind of counterproductive or doesn't move us towards power and doing anything to really fight fascism because this non-issue of the ballroom, but yet we have so many people following on and neoliberals liberals, right, or even going off about, the problem with the ballroom. I think the problem with the ballroom is we're paying too much attention to the ballroom. So
Yep.
I hope folks, quit doing that. So I think, let me see, uh, the Water League um, information. I'm looking at my list that I wrote down.
Well, you want me to talk about the
Yeah,
presentation
if you
briefly?
if you want to, yeah, about, I think that for one, the stuff that Water League does is really kind of all part of even the stuff that, Chuck Willer covered on the Wall Street forestry, stuff. It's really no longer, it's not just forestry. It's
No,
about everything. Water being the most critical.
right. Yeah. And I mean, it all, I think he brought a lot of that up yesterday. It really ties in all together. It's like all a result of, the capitalistic system too. By the
Yep.
way, he has the video done and I already have it posted on Facebook. It's on it's on CDR Facebook page. I think it's on Southern Oregon's progressive page too. So
Yeah,
anybody
I think
that
it is.
yeah, so anybody that wants to watch the video, can watch it. And I was really pleased with the attendance yesterday because last year when he was here, nobody showed up. So we had a great crowd, and he was very pleased with the audience and the audience's participation. He felt really good about it. So that was good, and I I think a lot of what he was bringing up about water just really, like you're saying, ties in with everything. Uh,
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
he
I
was,
think it was great. Yeah, and the work they do is great. Yeah.
yeah, he was. I had lunch with him at McMenamin's afterwards, and he was telling me a few conversations that he had with the state representative from from Hardy County, and the guy didn't want to really talk to Chris Hall, and said, "Why is what? Why is this drilling of water Harding County any concern of yours?
I
And
say, well, that's the problem.
yeah,
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 that's the concern that you
yeah,
even asked me that question.
yeah. And he said, because the water belongs to the people, and I'm part of, and I'm one of the people, and I have the right to prevent you from, from tapping, this basin dry. So I don't think the rep, the rep like that, reply, but it's, but you're right too. It's like, that is the problem. They feel like, well, it's only, it's, don't worry about it. This is only, it isn't affecting you. What is, it's affecting everybody. So,
Well, and unfortunately, with a guy like that, you can't go into the science of how it,
no,
physically actually affects everybody
right,
else.
right. Yeah,
That would be totally lost. But it's funny that you bring that up because it's one of the discussions when we had the gathering about Winchester Dam, where all the board members showed up with
yeah,
the Democratic Party did outreach. That's what they were asking, Andrew and asking us. Well, why are you interested? I said, because we're a member of the public and it's public water.
yes,
I mean, it's really that simple. It's not your water.
yes,
It's
So they
not
were
your right
asking
to
you.
control.
So they, and that's what happened at that board meeting you guys tried to have, or the
That
meeting about
meeting, yes,
they were intimidatingly asking you why you were
yes,
so interested in being involved.
yes.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering what they would actually, because I heard that they did like kind of bully everybody out of that.
They did.
But I was
They
just wondering,
did.
how did they do it? Did they shout and scream, or did they just like take up all the space, or stop, like take the
They
mic?
they they took up all the space. They actually, tried to talk over us, but I'm a little bit more seasoned and I just keep repeating the same phrase over and over until they shut up. Right.
Yeah, yeah. I
Because
mean,
there's
that's what
tactics to
happened.
actually stop that kind of disruptive bullying in a meeting. But, answering those kinds of questions, I certainly anticipated it before we went in there because that is the kind of crap that people come up with. Well, what's it your business?
yeah,
Right.
Well, it's public water. It's everyone's business. I don't know how to break it to you. It's everyone's business in the state of Oregon.
yes. Well, yeah, and Chris yesterday basically at the end tied all of this with Harney County, into Winchester Dam too. At the
Right.
end, yeah. So it's all related, yeah. And he tied that in there too. So it was,
And the reason, and and I did mention at that meeting that Lauren Reagan, who founded the Civil Liberties Defense Center, who does water defense work and does environmental stuff as well as civil rights and ICE, protection, abortion, a whole myriad of things. She was a keynote speaker here a couple of years ago and asked me what she should speak about and I said no, you tell me, because of all that experience, what is the most important thing you think we should know. And she was talking to the local Democratic Party, and she said water. And she said, really, that is the biggest environmental issue that we have to solve. That's the biggest issue we have to solve. And I think that that's true. And what Chris's work has done, or the Water League, really re-emphasize that. And we really need to take. And so these town halls, these kind of assemblies, these are the kinds of things you could talk about, right?
right.
And helping people make decisions, or at least informing the general public. Because, I don't think most people, I think most people would be surprised at even the sheer data of how much of our water is being used by agriculture
Yeah,
that ships out of Oregon,
yeah.
right?
It's it's absolutely shocking. I mean,
Right, it is.
he was saying too. He told me at among minimums that the irrigators, they have, how powerful they are to the state. With this, with what they're producing with alfalfa, and that it only represents 1.5% of the GNP of Oregon.
Right,
Yeah,
Probably because it all leaves, right? It isn't really utilized
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
community and the economy. There's a
yeah,
one, few expenses or where the government takes, subs the share, but sure. It's actually, I think that, and the whole issue of water rights, I think, is a very important issue, and that preemption. I think the more that people learn about this stuff, maybe that, there'll be a topic that grabs their attention enough to say, hey, how do I find out more and why in the hell is this happening? Because most of us don't know what's happening.
yeah, it's true. Yeah, and
Right.
I urge people to watch his
Yes.
video from yesterday. So, yeah, and he had some. I thought he explained community rights pretty good. I was impressed with with some of his explanations about community rights. I was impressed with that. So you know it was it was good. Yeah. So if you get a chance, Max, watch it. Watch at least the beginning of it.
Okay.
You'll learn a lot.
Is
There's
that
a
that?
lot. It was a lot. There was a lot to absorb there too. So
Uh-huh.
that's and he did the video last year, and he put it on YouTube, and he was happy. He told me yesterday that the video from the one he did last year, it's been on YouTube, and it's got like 340 views, and I was amazed. And so he keeps at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Cool.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's important information to know. And I was telling Max about that it's, in line with the kind of stuff that Chuck Willer does, right?
Yeah,
That kind of deep research and has developed this expertise. And it's a kind of knowledge that, the network I've discussed that I've been trying to organized throughout the state of this expertise on all these different political issues so people can connect with each other and
yeah.
help, strengthen what we do locally to organize about stuff. Um, Let me see that. So I want to, on that vein, there's the upcoming Global Warming Coalition that is meeting this Thursday at the library at 6:30. And their meeting is today's climate challenges, community resilience, and stability will be the discussion. Besides a climate expert, they're also going to have the local emergency response person for the county, which I might go just to see what they say because when we have tried to deal with, when we had that heat wave, which is an emergency, that actually a person living outside died down the street from me in the heat because there was, limited places for people to
Right.
go. We had actually reached out to the county and the city to find out what are you going to do in this heat wave to protect people. And the county was kind of like, oh, well, nothing. We tell you where you can, what you can do, and that's it. So I'm going to see if that's their response to all disasters in the future.
Well,
So
they had that building out there on Diamond Lake that used to be a color craft, and that's what filled with with stuff for emergency response. I mean, you know, how come there couldn't be a room in that, for shelter for people on extremely hot days? So
Oh, I didn't know about that. Yeah, there definitely needs to be. And I was just saying today, like, there's got to be some place for people to go. Uh, yeah, like a heating and cooling kind of center, but also just a place to go to, like, um, I don't know, like a third location to just just to go. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing we were talking about the public in the commons last a couple of times ago, and uh my studio, that's kind of how I treat it. Like people walk in and they can like get some snacks or they can hang out and play video games. And I just like that environment. I think more people probably would appreciate something like that, where some kind of community hub center, but we're told that this kind of thing is too expensive or something, I guess. I don't know. I mean, but anyway, that just reminded me of that.
what I think is you had to you had a name on a ballroom, and then you probably
We got to build a ballroom. Yeah, we should build a ballroom. But yeah, like just an all inclusive and like all purpose kind of a space. But yeah, also for like emergencies and stuff too. That's probably a good idea. Uh, but yeah, um, I'm gonna get going here in a minute. But I was gonna say just some notes of taking on the conversation that I'd like to express here, like um, uh, and it's not really related necessarily, other than that it's just in the same context. Uh, I mean, things are more and more like with loyalty tests going on with the type of fascism that we're seeing develop, and it kind of depends on causing more chaos for people and like you know uh, capitalizing on the results of that and everything. And so I was kind of going over an old thing I wrote on a wall one time. It said like "fight fascism," and it had like a Ninja Turtle waving like the nunchucks. And I just thought it was kind of funny because it's like, yeah, right, fight fascism. It's kind of, I mean, there's a reason why we're fighting fascism with clowns in the streets, and like blow up frog dolls or whatever. It's the absurdness of what they're doing has to be kind of countered with equally absurd but kind of humorous things, so, and that would be what I would call resisting it rather than fighting it, because fighting, what are we going to do? Fight fascism? Like they already, like, where are all the guys with the guns or whatever that are supposed to be taking back, the power from the government or from the Second Amendment or whatever, that's anyway. We're not going to fight it by force, it's not very likely anyway, unless we're able to infiltrate it, which then that's got its own um, challenges and issues. But anyway, that's all I want to say.
Hey, we can't get people to be, to do a rally for more than an hour and a half. They're not going to infiltrate the power structure
Right. And that's kind of what I was going to say
to
too, is
fight
like
fascism.
anything effective is probably not going to be on in the public level, it's going to be more of like a covert effort that is effective. And like we were saying, and I wanted to mention that earlier too, about the difference between rallying or public demonstration or
Protest.
protest. Then there's also the nonviolent civil disobedience action. It's nonviolent civil disobedient act. Anyway, civil disobedience is arguably like the only effective means of affecting change. Uh because yeah, like the voting and the voting with your dollar and the public dialogue doesn't really work for a lot of these things that are being pushed by force, from the people with upper hand and um, concentrated amounts of resources. So,
Although where we can have the most impact is for local elections, like
right.
you running for mayor, and really more people getting out there and running for office instead of just saying, ah, screw it, who cares? Because for one, the city controls a lot of money, the city of Roseburg.
Mm-hmm.
It controls, I don't know what, in comparison to the county budget. I mean, you're looking at, millions of dollars that um, the city of Roseburg actually controls, and the power that it has. And if people who understood, let's say, on the issue of authoritarianism, which is, part of the fascism, but really, that's what we do in regard to homeless people in Roseburg right now. It's very authoritarian. Go here, you don't, we send you to jail kind of stuff. That is, not um, even if they implemented it to where they arrested everybody. And the problem is that they don't arrest everybody because they don't have the means to pay for arresting everybody and incarcerating them every time they do a sweep. So they just keep sweeping them, which actually, in my mind, is probably a little bit more cruel than
Mm-hmm.
just,
Right. It's like it is
letting
a
them,
concentration camp. I mean, it comes down
right,
to
it
that,
is,
and
without walls, without fences.
we don't really need the fences to make it a managed camp, but they keep talking about putting a fence because to make it a managed camp. Like anyway, yeah, I don't um see much.
But the way we fight this stuff locally, which is where we have the most power, really is for people like you running for
Right.
office. Even if you don't
That is,
win and you start pushing back, on the power structure. Mayor Rich, I don't think he had an opposition. I can't remember when he had somebody oppose him for mayor.
No,
The
I
mayor
don't
runs
either. Yeah.
every 2 years,
yeah.
and he's been in there 20 some years. Really can't remember when he ever had a challenger. He
Yeah.
might have.
And that's where I'm talking like direct action is what that is to me. Like nonviolent civil disobedience. Like if I was being obedient, I wouldn't be running for mayor or talking about it even. Because get back in your place, like do your thing, go be an struggling artist or whatever, or move away from Roseburg because it's not, I don't know. There's all these different options, and it's like okay, running for office and inserting yourself into the public dialogue is probably a
Yeah.
pretty good form of direct action, I think.
Well, and I even encourage, Democrats to run for House District, even though it's a major uphill battle, right? Because then you have at least that alternative voice to, want the authoritarians. And I think the Douglas County Commissioners are authoritarians as well. I mean, they stand on this with this banner of freedom and liberty, but I think that's just bullshit. It's freedom and liberty for them, but all these other things, they don't pick people that they disagree with to be on their commissions, right? For example. So, that's really what an authoritarian does, not somebody who
Right.
wants the
Yeah.
voice of the people. But the same in the city council, and the mayor actually appoints all the people to the boards and commissions. So, that
Oh,
discussion could be part of, who's on these boards and commission, advising the city council, right? All
mhm.
that part of that power structure. And one of the things in conventional wisdom, if you ever want to run, usually if you want to run for office, if you want to start somewhere less than that run, sign up to be on a board and commission, commission, or within a city or county government, or even run for small districts. And I think that people need to start getting involved at that level. And let's be honest, if you think you don't have the qualifications to run for office or sit in those positions, look at the clowns who are there now. Okay, you think that they're
Yeah.
more qualified than you, and as you and I were talking about earlier, all the kind of technical stuff you need to learn, that can learn on the job. There's a lot of, things already set up to, train people to understand the nuances of city councils, and what they're supposed to legally be doing and not.
Well, I'd
So,
like to re uh, keep in mind what Zach was saying. I like that he mentioned that because I've never really thought about that either. I kind of think of our democratic leaning, system of having counselors and the legal system and like you know trial by jury and all that. It's like all so historical and everything. But for this area, yeah, I mean it's thinking in terms of what's been done here and not what we're like extrapolating from what's been done elsewhere. It is kind of just yeah, like the only thing we're used to doing is kind of authoritarian kind of crap that can be dressed up as if it was democratic,
right.
but it's
That's true. And you could blame and say, well, it's, the citizens' fault because they could always be engaged, but
oh, we
there's,
didn't vote in the home charter or whatever. Or what about
right.
sorry.
Go
But
ahead.
yeah, you're right.
And bringing the charter I mentioned as our constitution, we actually could, if you don't like the council mayor form of government, that could be changed by the voters in Roseburg by a changing the charter. And the Douglas County government structure could be changed. And I think it's really time to talk again about the change in the county charter. That dialogue needs to happen. There's a way we can change the way county government works that's more accountable to the people if we change that charter. It also eliminate that, two people and you got a quorum problem that Douglas County has. In order, because the county commissioners and people who are on those bodies need to be able to talk with each other to check them, check out, information. And it's historically people who are on these things. I don't care what level of government, they get people on their side to get a position passed, right? It's in, so Oregon law makes it a little challenging sometimes for people to do that, but they can still have those discussions. But I think, as a citizen, I do want the substance of those discussions held at the city council meeting, not behind anybody's closed doors. It says how the deliberation and decision needs to be in the public meeting. So we often see a decision. What we don't see is the deliberation of how they got there. And I think that that is where you can, even a campaign can start to hold it accountable. Like, are we really operating in the spirit of transparency?
Yeah, and
So,
making a visual vision, like you're saying there, they have no vision, for the future. I'd like to see, I have visions for future, we can all work together and create a collective vision,
yeah,
like at our own meetings.
right. Well, and that's the way that you can probably exercise that power, moving from protest to power, is by implementing some of the stuff on our own that Zach, has brought up about these local assemblies. And I do, wards are just one structure, as we mentioned before, to do that.
Mhm.
Um, so do you have any, campaign slogans or,
This sucks, change it. That's pretty sad, but I mean, that's everybody's. But it's a reference from Beavis and Butthead. That's one of their
oh, thank
favorite
you.
things to say when they're watching TV. This sucks, change it.
Yes, there is. I do not
So
know Beavis and Butthead. I mean, I know who they are, but my kids are,
we
we're more
want.
likely to be
I
wouldn't
want to
know that.
start with that and start with that and go, you know, uh, from there branch off to what do we want to change, what sucks. And in terms that Beavis and Butthead could understand. Essentially, we need to be able to, because this is what we're dealing with, and so, um,
I
yeah,
think that's great. I'm laughing just because it's funny, but I think you're right. I mean, to put it in that simple terms, um, change it, it
but yeah,
sucks. I think
I
that's a
mean,
great slogan.
and I mean it's general enough to where I think, and what I always notice about like schools and stuff too, everybody has a gripe about the school, whether they're like, oh, the teachers need to get paid more, or oh, the teachers are basically raising the kids because the parents don't raise them, or everybody's got to complain about the public systems. Like we all need to get together and like realize there's ways we can change it. And um, but yeah, getting into specifics, I don't think a lot of my ideas are going to be very popular among the loudest among Roseburg people. So I have a feeling it'll be met with a lot of contesting viewpoints and arguments, and we'll have to just hash it out and figure it out in a dialogue, in a public dialogue, and kind of um, accept when we have defeats or whatever. If something I say doesn't make sense or it's wrong, I'm always pretty open to admitting that and working through it and trying to integrate all the information that we come across. But yeah, the minute it becomes like you have to do something to compromise, you know, basic values and integrity, then like I don't think I want to try to run, in a way that is underhanded. I'm just kind of run on the good old democracy and diplomatic into uh, integrity in our public dialogue, which I think we need to start restoring by, yeah, having more neighborhood dialogues other than the city council. Because,
Yeah.
and so that's what I was going to say at the end of the meeting here was like maybe because tomorrow's the city council meeting, right? So I kind of figured we should do a neighborhood council meeting on a Monday at 7 and just the off Monday when we're not having a city council meeting, and start with our vision board of what we think we can do. And I mean, a lot of this comes from thinking about teachers and how they're largely doing a lot of the unpaid labor of raising children in our town, and that's where we're seeing the adults that are either leaving or staying here, and what's going on in each story of different families that so we need to um, get together outside of the city council and get the integral players of like the people that are participating in the city here, and not just kind of like checking out or whatever, and ignoring all the kind of constant crisis we have on our hands that when you look, it's pretty bad.
Well, I don't know if it's the most pressing problem, but I think it's probably is in Roseburg is the homeless issue, is the people living outside. Um, and I and I know the people who are into soccer are into soccer, but I bet you they also have something to say about homelessness, right? So if you're looking at soccer fields or that whole issue of how we make decisions, but the big issue is, how are we going to solve, how are we going to, get people off the street, or are we going to try to incarcerate them? So that might be, some dialogue, but it would certainly be a good idea in a campaign to just have your own little, town halls. And I know that
Yeah.
sometimes city councilor people do that as city councilors, but candidates certainly do that all the time. And have the community tell you what the issues are. That's another way to do it. It's just say,
Yeah.
hey, or you can get that information going door and start reaching out to folks and saying, hey, what do you think is the most important? What's the number one issue? Right? That might even help you narrow down what it is. I mean, there's things that a mayor can, facilitate doing something about, and there's things they can't.
Right.
Right. That's just the reality. So
Got to pick your battles. Yeah, that's
well, you just can't do anything about them. You have no power. The city may not even have jurisdiction over things. There's another issue that, that may come up is this whole, the water and what Winchester Dam is doing to the drinking water. Well, the drinking water is owned by the city of Roseburg. Right now, most people don't know there may be an impact on their drinking water, right? But most people know about homelessness in Roseburg,
right.
and I might have just this tunnel silo vision, right? Because of what I do. But any last words? And then John, any last words? And
No, anyway, talking about clowns and that, I get Max more information. We're working with Julian on the November the 13th. We're gonna at the Rainbow Kitchen there. We're gonna have a fundraising international potluck. So I'll be a fundraiser for Palestine and Gaza. So,
so what
it,
time and the cost to get in?
no, no, it's just come and we'll, it's free if you, especially, hopefully you could bring some food and then we'll pass the hat and whatever donations we get. And it's for actually it's for Uncle Tito. If you Google him, he's actually a clown, and he entertains the kids in Gaza. He tries to help them with all their stress and agony and everything. So that's going to be Thursday, November the 13th.
All right.
Thanks for saying that.
So I'll be stopping by your studio sometime and leaving you information. So
Max, any last words? Any last information?
No, not other than I was thinking about. Um, I was just gonna make a movie recommendation. There's this
Go
movie called
ahead.
Wing Kids, and it's about the onset of fascism kind of in Germany, the Nazis and stuff. But I keep thinking about that because it's like about the swing dancing movement too. So it's an interesting movie. I think people should watch. But then that Tito the Clown thing reminds me of another movie called Life is Beautiful, and it's about a guy in Nazi Germany who was like making light of situations and kind of like finding ways to bear the situation. And it kind of reminds me of Tito the Clown there that we were talking about, where in a place like Gaza, of course, uh, it becomes relevant to, really entertain people. Anyway, thanks.
All right, and thank you, Larry, for your questions, and hope to see you again next week. We will probably do a little bit of delving into what's happening with homelessness right now, what Housing First Umpqua is doing regarding the outreach and what is happening on that level. And then in the following weeks and the 23rd, we're going to have a discussion about education in Douglas County. Um, and uh, and hopefully in between the meantime, I had mentioned doing an interview with with Lauren Reagan from the Civil Liberties Defense Center. So thank you for joining.